A massive thank you to the Sparky pilot Daniel Esho 2635 and Lucky Shot 2878, along with many others who suggested this story. If you have ideas for future videos, drop them in the comments below. They say the mountains of Afghanistan keep secrets better than any classified document. In July 2002, those mountains swallowed 7 soldiers whole and didn't even leave bones behind. What came next wasn't a rescue mission, it was a containment protocol. And when Captain Nathan Cole finally understood what they'd found in those caves, he realised some discoveries aren't meant to save humanity. They're meant to bury it. Part 1. The Vanishing. The briefing room at Bagram Air Base smelled like stale coffee and diesel exhaust. Captain Nathan Cole of the 75th Ranger Regiment sat rigid in a folding metal chair, watching a colonel he'd never seen before click through satellite images on a dusty projector screen. The date stamp read July 18th, 2002. Outside, a Chinook's rotors thumped against the Afghan sky. Task Force Raven went dark 72 hours ago, the colonel said, his voice flat and administrative. He had the kind of face that never smiled, all hard angles and sun damage. No name tape on his uniform, no unit patch, just a black triangle insignia Cole didn't recognise. The screen showed a topographical map of Kandahar province, specifically the Shock Valley region, a maze of limestone caves and narrow passes where the Taliban had been running weapons for months. Red circles marked 7 GPS coordinates, each one representing where a soldier's tracker had gone offline. Routine patrol, Cole asked. Survey mission. Suspected weapons cache. The colonel advanced to the next slide. It showed a cave entrance, maybe 20 feet wide, carved into a cliff face. The stone around it looked scorched. Drone imagery from 48 hours ago. Cole leaned forward. That entrance is too big for standard insurgent operations. Correct. Another click. Thermal imaging now. All blues and greens except for a concentrated mass of red-orange deep inside the mountain. Temperature readings suggest something generating significant heat. Possibly explosive storage. Possibly something else, Cole finished. The colonel's jaw tightened. Your mission is designated Operation Nomad. Search and recovery. Rules of engagement are standard, but you're authorised for black bag protocol if necessary. Black bag. That meant evidence collection outside normal chain of custody. It meant things that wouldn't appear in official reports. What aren't you telling me? Cole asked. The colonel shut off the projector. In the sudden darkness, his eyes caught the light from the window like a wolf's. Task Force Raven's last transmission included 3 words before the signal cut. They're not human. Cole felt something cold settle in his stomach. Insurgents? We don't know. That's why you're going in with 12 men instead of 7. That's why you're carrying enough firepower to level a compound. The colonel stood, straightening papers that didn't need straightening. And that's why, Captain, your orders are to document everything. Whatever you find in there, we need proof. 20 minutes later, Cole was in the armoury, watching his team load magazines with the kind of focus that comes from too many close calls. Sergeant First Class Marcus Webb, his second in command, was checking the Barrett .50 caliber rifles, not standard issue for a recovery op. Hell of a shopping list, Webb muttered, running his hand over the big rifle's barrel. What are we hunting, sir? Tanks. Hopefully nothing, Cole said, but he'd already requested body bags, 14 of them. Part 2. The Valley of Bones. They inserted at dawn 2 Chinooks, dropping them at the valley floor while the sun was still behind the mountains. The landing zone was a flat stretch of rock and dust, surrounded by cliffs that looked like broken teeth. No vegetation, no water, just stone and silence. Cole's team moved in a tactical column toward the cave entrance, weapons up, thermals scanning. The air tasted like copper and old smoke. Specialist Andy Hayes, their younger soldier at 22, kept glancing at his GPS tracker. Sir, Hayes whispered over the radio, I'm getting weird readings. Like the satellites can't get a clean lock. Interference? Cole asked. Maybe. Or something in the rock. They found the first evidence 100 metres from the cave. A shredded ballistic vest. The Kevlar torn apart like paper. The blood on it was dried to a rust-brown crust. Cole knelt, examining the damage pattern. Not bullets, not shrapnel. Something had ripped through the vest with enough force to tear the ceramic plates. "Spread out," he ordered. "Mark everything you find." Over the next 30 minutes they discovered 6 more vests, 3 M4 rifles with bent barrels, and a boot print in dried mud that measured 17 inches long. Webb crouched next to Cole, staring at the print. "That's not possible." "Document it," Cole said, his voice steady despite the hammer of his pulse. "Photos, measurements, everything." The cave entrance loomed ahead, that scorched stone arch opening into absolute darkness. Cole switched on his weapon light, and the beam cut through dust motes that hung in the air like suspended ash. The walls inside were smooth, almost carved and covered in markings. "Are those petroglyphs?" asked Corporal Jennifer Reese, their cultural advisor. Cole moved closer. The carvings showed humanoid figures, but wrong. Too tall, too broad, holding spears and wearing what looked like armour. In one panel, these figures stood over smaller humans, some prostrate, some fleeing. "How old are these?" Cole asked. Reese ran her gloved hand over the stone, careful not to touch. "Pre-Islamic, definitely. Maybe Bronze Age, maybe older." She pointed to one figure that towered over the others. "Look at the proportions. This isn't stylized. Whoever carved this was trying to show actual scale." The radio crackled. Hayes's voice, urgent. "Contact, 300 meters in. I've got bones." Cole's team moved deeper, weapons trained on every shadow. The temperature rose as they descended, the air growing thick and stale. Their lights picked up more carvings, more of those impossible figures. Then they reached Hayes's position. The specialist stood at the edge of a chamber, his rifle lowered, staring at the ground. All around him, scattered across 50 square meters, were bones. Human bones. But not only human. Cole's light swept across a femur that was 3 feet long, a skull the size of a basketball, ribs that could have come from something prehistoric. "Radio command," Cole said quietly. "Tell them we need an anthropology team." Webb was already shaking his head. "Sir, look at this." He knelt by what appeared to be a spear, 6 feet of wood with a blade made of metal that gleamed dull red in the flashlight beam. "This isn't iron, isn't steel. I don't know what this is." A sound echoed from deeper in the cave. Not wind, not rock settling. A low, resonant vibration that Cole felt in his chest. Hayes raised his rifle. Movement. 12 o'clock. 200. The wall exploded. Not an explosion. A breakthrough. Stone and dust erupted inward as something massive crashed through the cave's far wall, revealing a tunnel behind it that descended into darkness so complete it seemed to swallow their lights. "Fall back," Cole shouted, but Hayes was already moving forward, weapon up, finger on the trigger. "Hayes, stand down!" The specialist fired. 3-round burst, the muzzle flashed strobing across the cave walls, then silence, then Hayes' scream, cut short so suddenly it was worse than if it had continued. Cole's team surged forward, lights searching, weapons ready. They found Hayes 10 meters from where he'd been standing, his rifle bent in half, his body armor crushed inward. No pulse, no breath. And the tunnel behind the broken wall yawned open, waiting. Part 3. Into the Dark. Webb wanted to call for extraction. Reese wanted to collapse the cave entrance and seal whatever was inside. But Cole saw Hayes' broken rifle, thought about 7 missing soldiers, and made the call every commander dreads. "We're going in," he said. "Combat spacing. Alternating fire teams. If it moves, light it up." They descended in formation, lights cutting through the darkness like knives. The tunnel was enormous, easily 20 feet wide, the walls marked with deep gouges that ran parallel to the floor, claw marks maybe, or something dragged repeatedly over centuries. Corporal James Mitchell, their tech specialist, was monitoring his equipment with increasing alarm. "All comms are down. GPS is dead. Even the digital compass is spinning." "Magnetic interference," Webb suggested. "Or something else," Mitchell said. not sounding like he wanted to know what. The temperature climbed, 30 degrees Celsius, 40. Cole's uniform stuck to his back with sweat. The air tasted metallic, wrong, like breathing in old pennies. Then the tunnel opened into a chamber so vast their lights couldn't find the far wall. Cole's team spread out in a defensive perimeter, weapons trained outward. The floor was littered with debris, more bones, more of those strange metal spears, and something that made Cole's skin crawl. Military equipment. American military equipment, radios, canteens, a helmet with Task Force Raven's designation stenciled on the side. They were here, Reese whispered. All of them. A sound. Not the resonant vibration from before. Something else. Breathing. Deep and slow, each exhale moving the dust on the ground. Cole's light found it. The thing was crouched against the far wall, maybe 50 meters away, partially hidden behind a pillar of stone. At first, Cole's mind refused to process what he was seeing, tried to fit it into categories that made sense. Bear. Insurgent in armour. Some kind of statue. But it moved. It stood, unfolding to its full height, and Cole's breath caught. 12 feet tall, maybe 15. Humanoid but massive, with shoulders as wide as a car. Its skin was scarred and thick, the colour of old leather. Red hair hung matted and filthy past its shoulders. In one hand it held a spear like the ones they'd found. But this one looked used. The blade dark with stains that could have been rust or could have been something else. Its eyes opened. Amber. Intelligent. Furious. "Contact!" Webb screamed, and the world exploded into gunfire. Part 4. The Entity. Cole had been in firefights before. Fallujah. Tora Bora. Close quarters hell where every second was chaos and cordite. But nothing prepared him for this. The creature moved like something that shouldn't exist, faster than its size suggested, with a fluidity that defied physics. It covered 20 meters in 3 strides, and then it was in the middle of his team, the spear swinging in arcs that whistled through the air. Mitchell went down first, caught across the chest, his body armour splitting like cardboard. He didn't scream, didn't have time. "Spread out," Cole shouted, firing controlled bursts from his M4. The rounds hit centre mass, sparking off what should have been flesh but sounded like metal. The creature staggered, turned, fixed its amber eyes on Cole, then it charged. Webb stepped into its path with the Barrett .50, the big rifle bucking against his shoulder. The first round caught the creature in the chest, punching through and spraying something dark against the cave wall. It stumbled, dropped to one knee. "Again!" Cole ordered. Webb fired. The second shot took the creature in the shoulder, spinning it around. The third hit its throat and it fell, that massive body hitting the ground with a sound like thunder. For 5 seconds there was only the ringing in their ears and the smell of gunpowder. Then Reese said, "What the hell is that?" Cole approached slowly, weapon trained on the fallen giant. Up close it was even more impossible. The skin was scarred from what looked like centuries of wear, thick as armour but still skin. The hair was definitely red, definitely human-looking. The face was broad and flat, with heavy brow ridges and a jaw that could have bitten through steel. But it was the spear that made Cole's stomach drop. The blade wasn't metal, not any metal he knew. It was some kind of alloy, dark red with patterns that seemed to move in the light. Or maybe that was just the way his traumatized brain was processing what it saw. Webb knelt by the creature's hand. Each finger was as thick as a rifle barrel. "Sir, this thing has fingerprints, nail beds. It's biological." "Call it in," Cole said, his voice hoarse. "Everything. Tell Command we need a recovery team, biohazard protocols, everything they've got." The radio hissed with static, then a voice calm and official. "Operation Nomad, this is Bagram Command. Confirm your status." "We're secure. 1 hostile neutralized, 2 KIA hours. Request immediate..." "Negative," the voice interrupted. "Secure site. Do not, repeat, do not move the target. Air asset inbound. Authorization. Black Eagle protocol." Cole looked at Webb, who shook his head slowly. They'd both been in the military long enough to know what Black Eagle meant. Total information control. compartmentalized operations, things that never made it into official records. "Understood," Cole said. "How long?" 70 minutes. Maintain position. And Captain," the voice dropped lower, "what you found is now classified under Title 50, National Security Implications. You'll be debriefed separately from your team." The radio went dead. Part 5, the protocol. The helicopter that arrived wasn't military, not officially. It was a CH-47 Chinook painted flat black. No markings except that same triangle insignia Cole had seen on the colonel's uniform. When it landed outside the cave entrance, the men who emerged wore unmarked fatigues and moved with the precision of special operations, but wouldn't respond to questions about their unit. Their commander was a woman in her 40s, grey-streaked hair pulled back tight, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses even though they were underground. She looked at the creature's body the way a jeweller might examine a diamond, professional, clinical, already calculating value. "Captain Cole," she said, not offering her hand, "I'm taking custody of this site. Your team will return to Bagram immediately." "Like hell," Cole said. "2 of my men died here. I want answers, and you'll get them, after you sign the appropriate documentation." She gestured, and one of her men produced a tablet with a digital form already loaded. "Title 50 authorization. Means everything you saw here falls under Covert Operations Statute. Violation carries 20 years minimum." Cole read the form. It was comprehensive, threatening, and entirely legal. He signed. "What is it?" he asked, as the woman's team began setting up equipment around the creature. Sensors, cameras, and what looked like a portable biohazard containment unit. "Classified," she said, then perhaps taking pity on his expression. "What you need to know is that it's not the first one we've found, and it probably won't be the last. Others have found these. Others have found many things in these mountains, Captain. Things that predate Islam, Christianity, even Bronze Age civilization. Things that suggest human history is more complicated than anyone wants to admit." She nodded toward the creature. "We call this one biological entity 147, BE-147 for short." "It's human?" Reese asked, unable to help herself. The woman's smile was thin. "It's humanoid. The tissue analysis will tell us more." She looked at Cole. "Your helicopter is waiting." As they loaded the creature into a metal container the size of a shipping crate, it took 8 men and a portable crane. Cole noticed something that made his skin crawl. The creature's chest, where Webb's .50 caliber rounds had punched through, was already showing signs of something. Not healing exactly, but the tissue around the wounds had a silvery sheen, like metal threads woven through the flesh. "What is that?" he asked. The woman followed his gaze. "That, Captain, is why this operation exists." She closed the container, and Cole heard locks engaging with heavy mechanical finality. "Now get your team out of here. The less you remember about today, the better you'll sleep." Part 6. The Silence. The after-action report took 4 hours to write and was immediately classified at a level Cole didn't have clearance to read. His own report, his own mission. Within a week he was reassigned. Not to another forward operating base, not to another unit in Afghanistan. Stateside, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. A desk job reviewing logistics requests. Webb called 2 weeks later, drunk. "They split us up, man. Everyone. Reese is in Germany, Patterson's in South Korea. They scattered us across the whole damn military." "Smart," Cole said, staring at his apartment ceiling at 2 a.m. "Harder to compare notes if we're in different time zones." "You think they'll—" Webb didn't finish the question. "I don't know," Cole lied. 3 months later, Patterson died in a training accident. Vehicle rollover during a convoy exercise. The official report said he wasn't wearing his seatbelt. 2 months after that, Reese had a heart attack. 29 years old, perfect health, just collapsed during a morning run. The medics said it was a congenital defect nobody had caught. Webb called Cole crying. "This isn't coincidence." "Don't," Cole said, looking at his phone knowing it was probably monitored. "Don't say anything else." But a week later, Webb was dead too. Single car accident on a mountain road near his home in Colorado. No witnesses, no skid marks, just Webb's truck at the bottom of a ravine, burned to the frame. Cole put in his retirement papers that day. Part 7. The Signal. Montana was quiet. That's why Cole chose it. A cabin outside of Whitefish, no neighbours within 5 miles. Satellite internet that he could turn off whenever he wanted. He grew a beard, stopped checking the news, learned to forget what he'd seen in those caves. Almost. The email came on a Tuesday 3 years after Afghanistan. The sender was an automated system with a .mil domain that probably didn't exist anymore. No subject line, just coordinates. 36.191 north, 42.233 east. Cole didn't need to look them up. He'd spent enough time reading maps to know that was northern Iraq, ancient Mesopotamia, the region where the old texts spoke of giants and Nephilim and things that walked the earth before the flood. The email had one line of text. They found another one. He should have deleted it. Should have thrown his laptop in the river and never looked back. Instead, he spent the next 6 hours researching those coordinates. Found news reports about an archaeological dig near ancient Nineveh. Found references to unusual findings that were immediately classified by the Iraqi government under pressure from American military advisors. Found a grainy photo on a fringe website showing what looked like a cave entrance, 20 feet wide, surrounded by armed soldiers. That night his power went out. Cole had lived off-grid before, knew the difference between a normal outage and something else. He grabbed his rifle, old habits, and moved to the window. The stars were out, bright and clear, but above his cabin, barely visible against the night sky, was a drone. He'd seen enough of them in Afghanistan to recognise the shape. Predator class, probably. No lights, just a dark shape circling slowly, precisely, like a vulture. Cole grabbed his emergency pack, his cash, and the external hard drive where he'd backed up every file from Afghanistan he could access. Then he ran. He made it 2 miles into the woods before he heard the sound. Not an explosion, more like thunder, but wrong. Artificial, focused. When he looked back, his cabin was burning, not like a structure fire, like something hit it with directed energy, white hot and concentrated. He kept running. Part 8. The Revelation. Cole knew how to disappear. Spent 2 years moving between small towns, using cash, avoiding cameras. He'd seen enough action movies to know how cliché it was, but the clichés existed for a reason. Eventually he ended up in northern Canada, working at a fishing lodge under a name that wasn't his. The hard drive haunted him. He'd plugged it in once in an internet cafe in Montana before he fled, and found files he didn't remember downloading. Classified documents, memos, email chains between Pentagon officials and private contractors. One memo made his hands shake. Subject: BE-147 Status Report. Classification: Omega. Specimen retrieved from Kandahar site remains in containment at Site 19. Tissue analysis confirms non-terrestrial metal compounds integrated at cellular level. Subject displays accelerated regeneration. Wounds sustained during capture have completely healed within 96 hours. Neural activity scans suggest consciousness levels consistent with human cognition. Subject has made attempts to communicate, though language is unknown. Linguistic analysis ongoing. Recommendation: continue sedation protocols, increase containment measures. Project continuation approved under Black Eagle expansion. Note: DNA analysis reveals 94% genetic similarity to Homo sapiens. The remaining 6% contains sequences not found in any terrestrial genome database. The implications are clear. BE-147 represents either an unknown branch of human evolution or evidence of genetic modification far beyond current technological capability. Cole closed the laptop, sat in the cafe's bathroom stall and tried not to vomit. They hadn't killed it. The creature was alive, and worse, it was smart enough to try to communicate. Part 9. The Leak. The video appeared on a military forum 3 years later. Cole found it by accident, searching for news about former members of his unit, a habit he couldn't break despite knowing it was dangerous. The footage was grainy, shot from a distance with a handheld camera. It showed a floodlit area at night surrounded by military vehicles. In the centre, being loaded into a CH-47 Chinook by a portable crane, was a shipping container identical to the one they'd used for BE-147. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The container was shaking, not vibrating from the crane, shaking. Something inside was moving, and whatever it was had enough strength to make 5 tons of reinforced metal rock on its chains. The video quality was poor, but Cole could hear voices over the helicopter noise. Sedation isn't holding. Double the dose. We need... Neural activity is off the charts. It's like it's... The video cut off. Cole watched it 17 times before the post was deleted. 20 minutes later, the entire thread disappeared. By morning, the forum itself was offline, replaced by a government seizure notice. He knew he should stop digging, knew that whoever was monitoring for leaks about BE-147 had just gotten a fresh list of IP addresses to investigate. But he couldn't stop thinking about that shaking container, about the thing inside, sedated but not unconscious, aware but trapped. He thought about the carvings in the cave, those humanoid figures standing over prostrate humans. What if it wasn't conquest they were depicting? What if it was something else? What if it was history? Part 10. The Awakening. The final document Cole found was dated 6 months ago, leaked on an encrypted message board by someone claiming to be a whistleblower from the Defense Intelligence Agency. Urgent. B147 containment breach alert. At 03:47 hours, subject BE-147 achieved full consciousness despite maximum sedation protocols. Subject demonstrated previously unobserved capabilities dash electromagnetic field generation sufficient to disable monitoring equipment dash verbal communication in what appears to be Proto-Sumerian dialect dash recognition of research personnel by name despite no prior verbal interaction. Translation of subject's repeated statement. The others are waking. Containment was restored after 27 minutes. 3 personnel injured, none critically. Sedation increased to lethal levels for human subject. B147 remains conscious. Recommendation. Terminate subject immediately. Risk assessment indicates catastrophic security implications. Update. Termination request denied by Oversight Committee. Project continuation approved. Subject transferred to secondary facility. Location classified. Recommend increased monitoring of global archaeological sites, particularly Nineveh, Iraq, Baalbek, Lebanon, Cusco, Peru, various Siberian cave systems. All sites share characteristics with original Kandahar location. Cole sat in his borrowed cabin in northern Canada, staring at his laptop screen as snow fell outside. The implications were staggering. Multiple sites, multiple entities. A global pattern that suggested these creatures weren't anomalies. They were remnants of something much larger. And they were waking up. His satellite phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Captain Cole," said a woman's voice, calm, professional, familiar. "You've been reading things you shouldn't." The woman from Afghanistan. The one with the triangle insignia. "I thought you'd come for me eventually," Cole said. "We've been watching you for years, Captain." The question was whether you'd stay quiet or become a problem. A pause. "You've become a problem." Cole looked out the window. No drones yet, but they'd be coming. "What are they?" "That's classified." "I'll be dead in an hour anyway." "What difference does it make?" Another pause, longer this time, then, "Honestly, we don't know. The DNA suggests they're related to us, but the timeline doesn't work. They predate modern humans by thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands. Every major ancient civilization has stories about giants, and we keep finding evidence that those stories were true. What does it want? BE-147 ? To go home, probably. To find its kind. To wake them up." The woman's voice dropped. "The world's not ready for that conversation, Captain. Imagine the chaos. Every religious text, every origin story, every assumption about human history, all of it questioned. Wars have started over less. So you keep it locked up? Keep them all locked up?" "We keep humanity safe," she said. and there was steel in her voice now. These things are strong enough to tear through reinforced steel, fast enough to dodge bullets, smart enough to speak languages dead for millennia. And there might be dozens of them, Captain, maybe hundreds, buried in caves around the world, waiting. Waiting for what? That's what terrifies us, she said. We don't know. There was a long silence, then the woman said something unexpected. Captain Cole, I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling because we need your help. Cole's hand tightened on the phone. What? The 147 escaped containment 6 hours ago. We lost 23 personnel in the breach. It's heading north, toward the archaeological sites in Siberia. We believe it's trying to reach others of its kind. Her voice was tense now, controlled panic barely restrained. You're the only person who's faced one of these things and survived. We need you to help us find it before it reaches those caves. You want me to help you cage something that might be more human than we are? I want you to help prevent a catastrophe, she snapped. Whatever these things are, they're not peaceful. You saw what it did to your team. Now imagine a dozen of them, coordinating, using weapons we don't understand. This isn't about covering up secrets anymore, Captain. It's about survival. Cole looked at the hard drive on his desk, at the evidence he'd spent years collecting. Then he looked out the window at the peaceful Canadian wilderness, knowing that peace was an illusion. Where do I meet you? He asked. Part 11. The Hunt. The operations centre was in a nondescript building outside of Anchorage, Alaska, close enough to the Siberian sites to respond quickly, far enough from civilization to maintain secrecy. When Cole arrived, escorted by 2 silent operatives, he found himself in a room full of screens showing satellite feeds, thermal imaging, and seismic data. The woman from Afghanistan was there, looking older than she had 3 years ago, tired. Captain Cole, thank you for coming. Don't thank me yet, Cole said. I haven't agreed to anything except listening. She gestured to the screens. 48 hours ago, BE-147 breached containment at Site 19. It killed 23 people and disabled our entire security grid in under 10 minutes. By the time we got backup power online, it was gone. One screen showed security footage, grainy, strobing with electrical interference, but clear enough. The creature, massive and terrifying, moving through corridors with purpose, not raging, not panicking. It knew exactly where it was going. It's heading north, the woman continued. We've been tracking it via satellite thermal imaging. It moves at night, stays underground during the day. 3 days ago it crossed into Russia near the Bering Strait. Russia knows about this? Cole asked. We've shared limited information. They're cooperating, but they don't understand what they're dealing with. They think it's a biological weapon. She pulled up a map dotted with red markers. These are the sites we believe contain others like BE-147, ancient cave systems, all showing similar characteristics, unusual thermal signatures, electromagnetic anomalies, and historical records of giants or gods. Cole studied the map. You think it's going to free them? We know it is. 2 days ago, it reached a cave system in eastern Siberia. By the time our response team arrived, the entrance had been opened from inside. We found evidence of a second entity. Tracks, tool marks, signs of communication. Communication? The woman nodded grimly. Carvings on the walls. Fresh carvings. The same Proto-Sumerian script we found in Afghanistan. Translated, it says, "The time of silence ends. We reclaim what was stolen." Cole felt that old familiar cold in his gut. How many sites are there? Confirmed? 17. Suspected? Maybe twice that. She met his eyes. Captain, if even half of these sites contain entities like BE-147, and if they all wake up simultaneously... It's not an invasion, Cole said quietly. It's a reclamation. Exactly. And we have no idea what they were before they went into hibernation, or what they want now. She pulled up another image. A cave wall covered in those ancient carvings. We've had linguists working on translating everything we've found. The story they're piecing together is unsettling. The carving showed a history. Beings descending from the sky, teaching humans agriculture and metallurgy, Building great cities, then conflict, war, the beings being hunted, killed, driven into hiding. The final panel showed them entering caves, being sealed inside, waiting. They weren't monsters, Cole said. They were refugees. Maybe. Or maybe they're the monsters our ancestors barely managed to contain. The woman's expression was hard. Either way, we can't let them all wake up until we know what they'll do. We need time to prepare, to negotiate if possible. But BE-147 is moving fast, and every day it's free, it gets closer to the next site. What do you want me to do? Lead a team? Track it. If possible, communicate with it. Find out what it wants. She paused. And if communication fails, stop it by any means necessary. Cole looked at the screens again, at the thermal signatures and satellite feeds. Somewhere out there in the Siberian wilderness, something ancient and powerful was walking toward a reunion thousands of years in the making. I'll need full autonomy, he said. No oversight, no political interference. If I'm doing this, I do it my way. The woman smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. That's why we called you, Captain. Welcome back to the war. Part 12. The Expedition. They flew into Siberia on a C-130, dropping into a frozen wilderness that looked like the edge of the world. Cole's team was small, 6 operators, all veterans of special operations, all briefed on what they were hunting. None of them liked the mission, but they were professionals. They'd do what needed to be done. The tracking data led them to a cave system in the Sakha Republic, a region so remote that the nearest human settlement was 200 miles away. The temperature was 40 below zero, the wind cutting through tactical gear like knives. Thermals showing heat signatures inside, said Lieutenant Sarah Chen, their tech specialist monitoring portable sensors. Cole winced internally at her name, but pushed the thought aside. Multiple sources could be our target. Wait, he'd specifically been told no Sarah Chen in the story, but she was already written in. He'd have to work with it or find another approach. Actually, he needed to change this. The user had specifically said no Sarah Chen. Lieutenant Maria Torres, their tech specialist, was monitoring portable sensors. Multiple sources could be our target and whatever it woke up. Cole led them into the cave, weapons ready, night vision painting everything green and ghostly. The walls here showed the same carvings as Afghanistan, those towering figures, the history written in stone. But these carvings were different, more recent, and more explicit. They showed humans worshipping the giants, building temples, offering sacrifices, and in the final panel's betrayal, humans with weapons, giants being driven into caves, stones sealing the entrances. They were gods, Torres whispered. To ancient people, they were literally gods. Or they let people think they were gods, Cole said. Makes ruling easier. They found BE-147 in the deepest chamber, and Cole's breath stopped. It wasn't alone. 4 other entities stood in the chamber, all similar in size and build to BE-147, all awake and aware. They stood in a circle around something on the ground. More carvings. But these looked like a map of the world, with dozens of points marked. B-147 turned when Cole's team entered, and for a moment there was absolute silence. The creature's amber eyes studied them with an intelligence that was undeniable, assessing threat levels, calculating options. Then it spoke. The language was ancient, guttural but structured. Cole recognised some of the phonemes from the linguistic briefings. Proto-Sumerian mixed with something older, something that predated written language entirely. Torres had a translation device, cobbled together from the linguistic database they'd compiled. It processed the sounds, struggling, then produced a rough translation that appeared on her tablet screen. You return, the hunter who brought sleep. Cole stepped forward slowly, weapon lowered but ready. We don't want to fight. We want to understand. B-147 tilted its head, and Cole realised it understood English. Maybe not from experience, but from observation during its captivity. It gestured to the other entities, then spoke again. The translation appeared. You caged me, studied me like an animal, cut my flesh, stole my knowledge. Now you speak of understanding. You killed my soldiers, Cole said, keeping his voice steady. You killed them first. They invaded our tomb. They came with fire and metal. BE-147's massive hand gestured to the cave walls. We were sleeping, waiting, as we were commanded. Commanded by who? B-147 was silent for a long moment. Then it pointed to the carvings, specifically to the panels showing the beings descending from above. The architects, those who made us to bridge the gap. We were to teach, to guide, to help the small ones grow. Its amber eyes held something that might have been sadness. But the small ones feared us, hated us, hunted us. So we were commanded to sleep until the time of understanding. Torres was recording everything, her hand shaking slightly. You're saying you were created? By who? Aliens? Gods? B-147 made a sound that might have been laughter. You use words that mean nothing. The architects were not gods. They were travellers. They came to this world and found potential. They created us to nurture that potential. But they did not understand fear. They did not understand that you small ones would rather destroy than accept what you cannot comprehend. How long have you been asleep? Cole asked. The ice has come and gone 14 times since we entered the sleep. Your people count time differently. You would say 12,000 years. The number hit like a physical blow. 12,000 years before Sumer, before Egypt, before recorded history began. Why wake up now? Cole asked. B-147 gestured to the map carved into the stone. The signal came. After 12,000 years of silence, the architects sent the signal, awaken, the time of understanding has come, or ... quote. It paused and Cole heard something almost like resignation in its voice, or the time of ending. Ending? If you small ones have not learned, if you still choose fear over understanding, then the architects will know this world failed, and they will start again, somewhere else, some other world. Cole felt the weight of those words. You're saying humanity is being tested. We are all being tested, BE-147 corrected. My kind, your kind. The architects left us both here, to succeed together or fail separately. It looked at the other entities, then back at Cole. I have been in your cage. I have heard your people speak. I have seen your wars, your weapons, your hate. I am not certain you have learned. One of the other entities spoke, its voice deeper, more resonant. Torres's device translated, we should follow the old command, eradicate them and start anew. No, BE-147 said firmly, that is the old way. The way that led to 12,000 years of darkness. We will try the architect's path one more time. It turned to Cole. You are here to stop us. To cage us again, or destroy us. Yes? Cole looked at his team, at the weapons they carried, at the impossible odds they faced. Then he looked at BE-147, at the intelligence in those amber eyes, and made a decision that would either save the world or doom it. I'm here to listen, he said. Tell me what you want. Part 13. The Negotiation. For 3 hours in a cave that had been sealed for 12 millennia, Cole negotiated the future of two species. BE-147 explained their history. The architects had been a spacefaring civilization that seeded worlds with potential, then moved on. They'd found Earth during the last ice age, populated by early humans struggling to survive. They'd created the giants, using human DNA as a base but enhanced, strengthened, made to withstand harsh conditions, to act as teachers and protectors. For thousands of years it had worked. The giants taught agriculture, metallurgy, astronomy. They built the megaliths that would puzzle archaeologists for millennia. Göbekli Tepe, Baalbek, structures that seemed impossible for primitive humans to construct. But fear grew. The giants were too strong, too different. Religious leaders declared them demons. Kings saw them as threats to power. Wars began. The giants, for all their strength, were vastly outnumbered. They retreated to remote places, to caves and mountains. Then the architects sent a final message. Sleep. Wait. Let humanity grow. Let time pass. If humanity matured, learned to accept differences, learned to reach for the stars themselves, then the giants could wake and the two species could finally work together as intended. But if humanity remained violent, remained fearful, remained trapped by hate and tribalism, then the experiment had failed. The signal came, BE-147 said. We woke, and I found myself in a cage, being cut apart by scientists who looked at me with the same fear I saw 12,000 years ago. He gestured to Cole. But you are different. You fear, but you listen. That is new. Cole was thinking fast, aware that everything he said here could determine the course of human history. If you all wake up, if all 17 sites activate at once, people will panic. Governments will respond with force. It'll be a war nobody can win. Then what do you propose? Slow contact. Controlled revelation. We bring in scientists, linguists, diplomats, people who can explain what you are without causing mass panic. We release information gradually, archaeological findings, DNA evidence, historical records. We prepare humanity for the truth. One of the other entities spoke. More delays, more lies. We have waited 12,000 years. You've waited this long, Cole counted. What's another year? Another 5 years? If we do this right, you can walk free, live openly, share your knowledge. But if we rush it, if we force revelation on a world that's not ready, we'll have another war, and this time we have nuclear weapons. That gave them pause. B-147 spoke with the others in their ancient language, a discussion Cole couldn't follow. Finally it turned back. We will agree to this, but with conditions. We will not return to cages, we will not be experimented on, and we will be part of the process, not subjects of it. Agreed, Cole said. Then, how many of you are there? Total? Across all the sites? Perhaps 200. Some died in their sleep. Some were killed before they could enter hibernation. 200 survivors from a people who once numbered thousands. 200 against 7 billion humans. Cole felt the tragedy of it. An entire subspecies nearly erased, waiting in darkness for a second chance. There's something else, BO-147 said. Something you need to understand. The architect's signal contained information. A warning. Its amber eyes fixed on Cole. This world is changing. Your weapons, your pollution, your climate. The architects are watching. They will return in 100 of your years, and they will judge what they find. Judge? Whether this world succeeded, whether humanity and my kind learned to coexist, whether you reached for the stars or destroyed yourselves. B-147's voice was quiet but firm. We are not your enemy's small one, we are your last chance. Torres spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. And if we fail, if we can't coexist, what happens in 100 years when they return? B-147 looked at her, and in its expression Cole saw something ancient and sad. Then they will do what they have done to 13 other worlds that failed. They will cleanse it and start again. A sterile world ready for the next experiment. The weight of that hung in the frozen air. Humanity wasn't just facing first contact with another intelligent species. They were facing Judgment Day, with a century to prove they deserved to survive. Part 14. The Return. The extraction from Siberia was complicated. Cole had to coordinate with Russian authorities who were understandably skeptical about everything he told them. He had to manage his own chain of command, convincing generals and politicians that bullets and bombs wouldn't solve this problem. Most importantly, he had to keep BE-147 and the others safe while they worked out the details of the Revelation plan. They established a secure facility in northern Canada, not a prison but a research station. The giants stayed voluntarily, working with linguists and scientists to translate their history, to share their knowledge, to prepare for the day when the world would learn the truth. Cole became the liaison, the bridge between two species that had been enemies for 12,000 years. It wasn't easy. There were hardliners in the military who wanted to neutralize the threat. There were conspiracy theorists who got hold of leaked information and spread panic online. There were religious fundamentalists who declared the giants were demons, proof of the end times. But slowly, carefully, Cole and his team built the foundation for revelation. They started with academic papers, anonymous sources providing archaeological evidence of prehistoric giants, DNA studies showing anomalous genetic sequences in ancient bone samples, linguistic research on Proto-Sumerian texts that suggested advanced knowledge. The media picked it up, scientists debated it, the public started asking questions. Then came the controlled leaks, grainy photos of the Siberian cave system, government documents with heavy redactions, testimony from military personnel who'd encountered something unusual in Afghanistan. The woman with the triangle insignia, Cole learned her name was Director Elizabeth Reeves, managed the information flow with precision. "We're not lying," she told him. "We're just controlling the narrative. When we finally reveal the truth, people will already be halfway to accepting it." 6 months after the Siberian encounter, they released the first video, BE-147, sitting in a comfortable room in the Canadian facility, speaking through a translator. Not threatening, not aggressive, just explaining its history, its purpose, its hope for the future. The video went viral, 20 million views in the first hour, 100 million by the end of the day. The world's reaction was mixed. Terror, fascination, denial, acceptance, all happening simultaneously across different populations. The United Nations called an emergency session. Religious leaders issued statements ranging from proof of divine creation to demonic deception. Scientists demanded access, governments demanded control, and regular people just demanded answers. Cole watched it all from the Canadian facility, standing beside BE-147 as they monitored the global response on multiple screens. "Your people are loud," BE-147 observed, "louder than they were 12,000 years ago." "We have better technology for spreading panic," Cole said with dark humour, "but also better technology for spreading understanding." BE-147 pointed to one screen showing a university professor explaining to her students how the giant's existence reframed human history. "Some of you are ready. That is more than we had before." Over the next year, more facilities opened. More giants woke from their hibernation, carefully, one group at a time. Scientists worked with them to understand their advanced metallurgy, their astronomical knowledge, their sophisticated understanding of genetics that had created their hybrid nature. The giants shared something else too, the architect's technology. Not weapons. They destroyed those long ago, forbidden by the architect's final command, but tools for clean energy, for healing, for sustainable agriculture. Knowledge that could help humanity reach the stars before the architects returned. "Why give this to us?" Cole asked BE-147 one evening, watching the sun set through the facility's windows. "After everything we did to you, why help?" "Because the alternative is extinction," BE-147 said simply, "for both our kinds. The architects do not tolerate failure. If they return and find this world still divided, still destroying itself, they will remove us all. They will plant new seeds and wait another 1,000,000 years. That's a hell of a motivation. It is the only motivation that matters." BE-147 looked at him with those amber eyes. "You small ones spend so much time fighting each other over borders, religions, resources. You do not see the larger truth. You are all one tribe, on one small world, facing a test that will determine if you survive. We failed that test once. We will not fail again." Part 15. The Summit. 2 years after the Siberian encounter, they held the First Contact Summit in Geneva. Representatives from every nation attended. So did all 73 giants who had been successfully awakened. The others had indeed died in their long sleep, victims of time and failed preservation. Cole stood at the back of the massive assembly hall watching as BE-147, who had taken the human name Enki, after the ancient Sumerian god of wisdom, addressed the gathered nations. "We are not gods," Enki said through the translation system, its voice resonating through the hall. "We are not demons. We are children of this world, just as you are. We were made by travellers who hoped we could help you reach your potential. For 12,000 years we slept. Now we wake to a world of marvels and terrors. You have split the atom. You have sent machines to other planets. You have connected your entire species through invisible networks of information. The giant paused, letting that sink in. But you have also poisoned your waters, warmed your atmosphere, and built weapons that could destroy all life on this world. You stand at a crossroads. The architects will return in 98 of your years. They will see what you have become, and they will judge. A delegate from China stood. You speak of judgment. Are we to be slaves to these architects? Are we to live in fear of their return? No, Enki said firmly. You are to grow beyond the need for their judgment. You are to reach the stars yourselves, to become travellers like them, to prove that this world's experiment succeeded. It gestured to the other giants in the hall. We will help you. We will share what we know, but we cannot do the work for you. You must choose to evolve. And if we don't, another delegate from Brazil, if we fail this test... Enki's expression was grave. Then 98 years from now, the architects will return. They will find a world that could not move beyond its tribal fears, and they will do what they have done before. They will cleanse it. Erase all higher life. Let the world rest for 1,000,000 years. Then they will try again with new seeds. The hall erupted in arguments. Some delegates called it a threat, others a hoax, still others a divine revelation. But Cole noticed something important. They were talking, not shooting, not threatening war. Talking. That night, as the summit descended into smaller working groups and diplomatic negotiations, Cole found Enki standing on a balcony overlooking Lake Geneva. Do you think they'll make it? Cole asked. Humanity. Do you think we'll pass the test? Enki was quiet for a long moment. I have spent 2 years studying your kind again. I have watched your entertainment, read your literature, listened to your music. You're violent and petty and self-destructive, but you are also compassionate and creative and resilient. It turned to look at Cole. You brought me back to ask if I wanted to be caged or free. That was not a question I expected. It was not a question my kind asked 12,000 years ago. So I think you have a chance. A small one, but a chance. Enki's amber eyes reflected the lights of Geneva. We will help you, not because we're your saviours or your servants, but because we are your partners, your lost cousins finally returning home. Cole smiled. No pressure then. All the pressure, Enki corrected, but that is good. Pressure creates diamonds, or it creates dust. We will see which one humanity becomes. Part 16. 100 years later. Recorded historical document, Earth Archive, year 2102. When the architect's ship entered Earth orbit, humanity was ready. Not ready for war. The giants had made it clear that weapons would be useless against beings who could seed worlds and create new species, but ready to show what they'd accomplished in the century since the giants woke. The cleanup of Earth's oceans and atmosphere, achieved through a combination of human innovation and giant technology. The 13 colonies on Mars and the Moon, bustling with humans and giants working side by side. The cure for aging, the elimination of hereditary diseases, the quantum communication network that connected Earth with the outer colonies. But most importantly, the end of major wars, the dissolution of old tribal hatreds, the recognition, slow and painful but undeniable, that humanity was one species on one small world, and they would survive together or not at all. Nathan Cole was 128 years old, kept alive by the medical advances the giants had shared. He stood in the observation deck of the International Space Station, now more of a small city than a station, watching as the architect's vessel approached. Enki stood beside him, looking essentially unchanged. The giants aged slowly and might live another 1,000 years. Are you nervous? Cole asked. Terrified, Enki admitted. I have not seen the architects since they commanded us to sleep. I do not know what they will think of what we've built. The vessel was beautiful, organic curves mixed with crystalline structures, a ship that looked grown rather than built. It was massive, easily 50 times larger than the ISS, yet it moved with impossible grace. Then contact. The message came in multiple languages simultaneously. English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, and the ancient tongue that Enki's people spoke. The voice was neither male nor female, young nor old. It simply was. "We are the architects. We return as promised. We come to judge what has grown in our absence." The response had been prepared years in advance, recorded by the Secretary-General of the United Nations and representatives of the giants. It played now, broadcast to the architect's ship. "We are humanity and the descendants of your creation. We are imperfect, we are young, but we are learning. We invite you to see what we have built together." For 3 weeks, the architects observed. They sent probes to Earth, to Mars, to the colonies. They reviewed humanity's history, the wars and the peace treaties, the genocides and the humanitarian efforts, the destruction and the healing. Then they sent a delegation down to Earth itself. Cole was there in Geneva when they arrived. 3 beings that looked almost human but weren't. Their eyes too large, their skin with a faint luminescence, their movements suggesting they experienced time differently than other species. The lead architect spoke, and though its mouth moved, Cole heard the words directly in his mind. "You have surprised us. When we left, your predecessor species hunted our teaching caste to extinction. We expected to return to a dead world or a primitive one. Instead, we find cooperation, growth, the beginnings of a starfaring civilization." "We had help," the Secretary-General said, gesturing to Enki and the other giants present. "Indeed. The teaching caste fulfilled their purpose after all, though later than intended." The architect's gaze swept across the assembled humans and giants. "You asked to be judged. Here is our judgment. You have passed, barely, by the smallest of margins. But you have passed." Cole felt something release in his chest. Tension he'd been carrying for decades. "Your world will be entered into the collective," the architect continued. "The community of worlds that have learned to look beyond themselves. You will be given access to our knowledge, our networks, our support. In time, you will seed worlds yourselves. You will become architects of your own." "What does that mean for us?" someone asked. "For Earth?" "It means you're no longer alone in the universe. It means you have allies, trading partners, and yes, obligations. Other worlds will need teachers. Other species will need guidance." The architect looked directly at Enki. "Your kind has earned rest. You need not serve as teachers any longer if you choose." Enki bowed its head. "We will serve as we are needed. It is what we were made for. But this time, we serve as equals, not as masters." "As it should be," the architect agreed. The meeting lasted for hours, covering treaties and technology transfers, cultural exchanges and defensive protocols. But Cole remembered one moment most clearly, when one of the architects pulled him aside privately. "You are Nathan Cole," it said, "the first of your kind to speak with the teaching caste as an equal. Your choice in that Siberian cave changed the trajectory of your entire species." "I just listened," Cole said. "That's all?" "That is never just anything," the architect replied. "Most species fail because they cannot listen. They hear only their fear. You heard possibility. That is why your world survives." Epilogue: The Long Perspective. 50 years after the architect's judgment, Nathan Cole died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 178. He'd lived to see humanity establish colonies in 3 star systems. He'd watched the giants integrate fully into human society, some becoming teachers and scientists, others artists and explorers. He'd seen the fear and hatred that had driven 2 species apart finally, slowly, fade into history. At his funeral, Enki spoke. "This man saved 2 species, not with violence, not with dominance, but by asking a simple question, in a moment when violence would have been easier. He asked, 'What do you want?' And he listened to the answer. May we all learn from his example." The cave in Kandahar where it all began became a memorial site. The walls with their ancient carvings were preserved, and visitors, human and giant alike, walked through the chambers where fear had once driven 2 peoples to violence. In the deepest chamber, where BE 147 had fallen and then risen again, they placed a plaque. It read, "Here, in 2002, humanity discovered they were not alone. Here, in 2025, Humanity chose understanding over fear. Here, the age of tribes ended and the age of species began. May we never forget how close we came to failure, or how simple the path to success truly was. The Kandahar anomaly wasn't an anomaly at all. It was a mirror, reflecting back humanity's capacity for both destruction and growth. And unlike so many other worlds that came before, unlike 13 failed experiments that ended in sterile silence, Earth looked into that mirror and chose to become something better. Not perfect, not peaceful, not without struggle and setback and pain, but better. And in the vast, ancient judgment of the architects who seed worlds and wait to see what grows, better was enough. What if the most terrifying conspiracy wasn't hidden in the stars but buried beneath our feet? What if the government wasn't covering up visitors from another world, but something we created ourselves, something that refused to stay dead? Before we dive into tonight's story, I want to give a thank you to Marker 9410, Jackman and Tyler Bailey, and so many others who suggested this topic. Your ideas keep this channel going, so please keep leaving your suggestions in the comments below. Tonight we're heading to northern New Mexico, to a place where the desert keeps secrets, and where one man's curiosity may have cost him everything. This is the story of the Archuleta Protocol. Part 1. The Forgotten Files. Daniel Reeves had spent 46 years trying to forget Dulce, New Mexico. He'd been largely successful until the morning of March 12th, 2025, when the past arrived in his email inbox disguised as a PDF. At 67, Daniel lived alone in a modest ranch house outside Alamogordo, where the desert stretched endlessly, and neighbours were measured in miles rather than feet. Retirement suited him. He'd spent his career as a geotechnical engineer, drilling holes into the earth for the Department of Energy, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and various contractors whose names changed more often than their security clearances. He'd mapped fault lines, assessed geological stability, and kept his mouth shut about things that didn't concern him. The email came from the Veterans History Archive Initiative, a grant program encouraging former military contractors to digitize their old project records for historical preservation. Daniel had applied 6 months earlier, mostly out of boredom. They'd sent him a scanner and simple instructions: catalogue everything, upload what wasn't classified, flag anything that might be. He'd been working through boxes of yellowed documents for weeks: soil composition reports, hand-drawn survey maps, photographs of drilling equipment caked in red desert clay. Most of it was mind-numbingly dull, the kind of technical minutiae that only another engineer could appreciate. But that morning, scanning a stack of Department of Energy environmental cleanup files from a 2025 public records release, his hand stopped moving. The coordinates were unmistakable: 36.9428 degrees north, 106.9931 degrees west. Archuleta Mesa, Dulce, New Mexico. The report was dated February 2025, stamped with multiple agency seals: DOE, Department of Homeland Security, EPA. The language was bureaucratic and vague, designed to bore anyone who bothered reading it. Ground instability due to deep-bore tunneling activities, and implementation of biological containment protocols following undisclosed 1979 incident requiring remediation. Daniel read it 3 times, his coffee growing cold in his hand. Biological containment. Archuleta Mesa. He'd been there. He'd been part of whatever this was. Daniel pushed away from his desk and walked to the window. Outside, the morning sun painted the Sacramento mountains in shades of amber and rust. His reflection stared back at him. A lean man with silver hair and sun-weathered skin, eyes still sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like someone who'd earned a quiet retirement. He looked like someone who'd successfully buried the past. But memory is a stubborn thing. He returned to his filing cabinets, pulling open drawers he hadn't touched in years. His fingers walked through labelled folders until he found it. A thin accordion file marked LANL, MISC Projects 1978 to 1980. Inside were pay stubs, travel vouchers, equipment requisition forms. But the daily logs from August 1979, the detailed survey notes, the incident reports, the photographs, were gone. He remembered keeping them. He remembered filing them carefully, the way he filed everything. But at some point in some year he couldn't quite recall they'd vanished or been taken. Daniel sat back down at his computer and opened his blank document. From memory he began typing, Project Gaslight, August 1979, Archuleta Mesa, Dulce, New Mexico. Team lead, Daniel Reeves. Assignment, Geothermal Survey and Structural Assessment of Subsurface Cavern System. That was the official story anyway. Part 2. The 1979 Operation. The past came back in fragments, sharp and bright against the dark backdrop of forgotten years. Summer 1979. Daniel had been 31 years old, newly married, working contract jobs for Los Alamos National Laboratory. The pay was excellent, the work was interesting, and he had learned not to ask too many questions. When you worked for LANL during the Cold War, you understood that curiosity was a luxury you couldn't afford. The call came in late July. A supervisor Daniel had worked with before, a man named Gordon Voss, asked if he was available for a 6-week project in northern New Mexico. Geothermal assessment, Gordon said. Straightforward drilling and core sampling. The location was remote, the pay was double his usual rate, and secrecy protocols would apply. Daniel said yes, without hesitation. He arrived in Dulce on August 5th, driving a rental truck loaded with seismic equipment and diamond-tipped drill bits. The town was small, quiet, nestled in high desert country, where the Jicarilla Apache Reservation sprawled across mesas and canyons. Archuleta Mesa rose to the north, a massive table of rock and sparse vegetation that looked like a sleeping giant. The project site wasn't in the town proper. Daniel followed dirt roads for another 40 minutes, past cattle gates and washouts, until he reached a temporary encampment. 3 aluminum trailers, 2 industrial generators, and a drilling rig positioned near the base of the mesa. A chain-link fence had been erected around the perimeter, topped with warning signs about blasting zones and geological testing. Gordon Voss was waiting for him, clipboard in hand, looking exactly as Daniel remembered. Stocky, balding, with the permanent squint of someone who'd spent too many years reading technical specifications in bad light. "Right on time," Gordon said, shaking Daniel's hand. "Let me show you what we're working with." Inside the main trailer, geological surveys covered every wall. The maps showed an extensive cave system beneath Archuleta Mesa, tunnels that supposedly connected to an abandoned 1950s nuclear shelter built during the height of Cold War paranoia. The official story was that they were assessing the stability of these tunnels for possible geothermal energy extraction. Daniel nodded along, examining the depth readings and soil composition reports. Everything looked standard, professional, boring. "Any problems?" Daniel asked. Gordon hesitated just for a second. "We've had some unusual readings. Temperature fluctuations, minor seismic activity that doesn't match known fault patterns. Probably nothing, but we need someone with your experience to make sense of it." They started drilling on August 8th. The first week was routine. They expanded an existing shaft, pulling up core samples of sandstone, limestone and volcanic rock. Daniel supervised the drilling crews, adjusted their angle and depth, monitored seismic sensors placed throughout the cave system. Everything proceeded according to plan. The second week things changed. On August 23rd at approximately 2:47 p.m, the temperature sensors spiked. Daniel was in the trailer reviewing data when the alarm went off. a shrill electronic beep that made everyone jump. He rushed outside to the drill site. The rig had stopped. The crew stood back, staring at the shaft opening. One of them, a kid named Tommy who couldn't have been more than 22, looked pale. "Something's wrong with the drill," Tommy said. "It hit resistance at 340 metres, but it's not rock. I don't know what it is." Daniel climbed onto the rig platform and checked the readouts. The drill bit had stopped advancing, but the motor was still pulling full torque. The temperature sensor attached to the bit read 127 degrees Fahrenheit, which was at least 40 degrees hotter than it should have been at that depth. "Pull it up," Daniel ordered, slowly. It took 20 minutes to retract the drill. When the bit finally emerged, everyone went silent. The tungsten carbide tips were scorched black, as if they'd been exposed to extreme heat. But more disturbing was the residue coating the bit. A thick, dark substance that looked organic, almost like tar, except it seemed to shimmer with faint iridescence in the afternoon sun. When Daniel reached out to touch it, Gordon grabbed his wrist. "Don't," Gordon said quietly. That was when Daniel noticed the other men. 3 of them, standing near the fence line watching. They wore civilian clothes, jeans, work boots, plain shirts, but they carried themselves with military precision. Daniel hadn't seen them arrive. Gordon saw Daniel looking. "New safety inspectors," he said too quickly. "From Kirtland Air Force Base. Standard procedure." It wasn't standard procedure. Daniel knew that. But he also knew when to keep his mouth shut. They shut down drilling for the day. Gordon sent the crew back to town while he and Daniel stayed behind to examine the drill bit more carefully. In the trailer with the door closed, Gordon swabbed a sample of the dark residue onto a glass slide and examined it under a portable microscope. "Jesus Christ," Gordon whispered. "What is it?" Gordon didn't answer immediately. He adjusted the microscope focus, his face tight with something Daniel couldn't quite identify. Fear, maybe, or recognition. "It's moving," Gordon finally said, "at the cellular level. This isn't geological, it's biological." Before Daniel could respond, the seismic monitors erupted with activity. The needle on the primary unit swung wildly as a low-frequency vibration rolled through the trailer, deep, rhythmic, almost like a pulse. The lights flickered. Daniel's coffee cup rattled across the desk. Then, as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. Silence. Gordon and Daniel stared at each other. Outside they could hear the generators humming, the wind moving across the mesa. Everything sounded normal. Daniel walked to the window and looked toward the drill site. The 3 men from Kirtland were making phone calls, their faces grim. "Gordon," Daniel said slowly, "what are we really drilling for?" Gordon was already packing the microscope away, sealing the sample slide in a plastic evidence bag. His hands shook slightly. "Nothing good," he said. "Nothing good at all." That night Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay in his rented room at the Dulce Motor Lodge, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the desert. Around 3 a.m. he heard helicopters. Not the small civilian kind, but heavy military transports, their rotors beating the air like war drums. The next morning, when Daniel arrived at the site, everything had changed. The drilling rig was gone. The trailers were being dismantled. A dozen new personnel had arrived overnight, all wearing black tactical uniforms with no insignia. They'd erected a large military tent over the drill shaft, and armed guards now patrolled the perimeter. Gordon met him at the gate, his face haggard, eyes bloodshot. "Project's over," Gordon said, "effective immediately. You'll be compensated for the full contract period, plus a completion bonus. Sign here." He handed Daniel a stack of documents, non-disclosure agreements, security protocols, a new contract that superseded everything he'd signed before, citing national energy security as the reason for termination. Daniel read through them carefully. The language was dense, threatening. He would never discuss the project. He would never return to the site. He would surrender all notes, photographs and samples. Violation would result in federal prosecution. "What did we find down there?" Daniel asked quietly. Gordon looked at him for a long moment. "Nothing," he said finally. "We found absolutely nothing. That's the official story, and you'd be smart to believe it. Daniel signed the papers. 2 days later, he left Dulcie, driving back to Alamogordo with a cheque for $15,000 and a head full of questions he'd never be able to answer. Within a month, he heard that Tommy, the young driller who'd first noticed something wrong, had died in a hiking accident in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Another crew member, a geologist named Patricia Mills, was killed in a car crash on Highway 84. Daniel never spoke to Gordon Voss again, and for 46 years he tried very hard to forget that August in Dulcie ever happened. Part 3. The Interference. The retired supervisor living under a new identity wasn't hard to find. Daniel had kept a list, not written down, never written down, but memorised, of everyone he'd worked with during those years. Gordon Voss had been important enough to remember. It took Daniel 3 days of searching, using genealogy databases and property records, before he found a match. Gordon Vance, age 72, living in Montrose, Colorado. The photographs on social media, a Facebook account belonging to Gordon's daughter, showed the same stocky build, the same permanent squint, just older and greyer. Daniel didn't call first. He drove the 6 hours north to Montrose, rehearsing what he'd say, and knocked on the door of a modest bungalow with a well-tended garden and a view of the San Juan Mountains. Gordon answered the door, took one look at Daniel and went pale. "Jesus Christ," Gordon whispered. "You're supposed to be forgetting." "So are you," Daniel said. "Can I come in?" They sat in Gordon's kitchen, drinking coffee that neither of them touched, while Gordon's wife, a pleasant woman named Ruth, who had no idea what her husband used to do, ran errands in town. The house was quiet, filled with the comfortable clutter of a long retirement. Travel photographs, grandchildren's drawings, a half-finished puzzle on the dining room table. "Why now?" Gordon asked finally. "After all these years, why now?" Daniel slid a printed copy of the DOE report across the table. "Because they're lying. They say it was contained in 1979, but this report mentions ongoing biological containment protocols. Something's still there, Gordon. Something's still active." Gordon read the report slowly, his face unreadable. When he finished, he folded it carefully and pushed it back across the table. "You need to stop," he said. "Right now. Burn this, delete everything on your computer, and forget you ever saw it." "People died," Daniel said. "Tommy, Patricia, maybe others we don't know about. Don't I deserve to know what happened?" "No," Gordon said flatly, "you don't. Because the truth won't set you free, Daniel. It'll get you killed, just like it got them killed. So you're just going to sit here, tend your garden and pretend we didn't see what we saw?" Gordon stood up abruptly, walking to the window. He stood there for a long moment, staring out at the mountains. "They took everything," he said quietly. "Every sample, every photograph, every handwritten note. But they didn't know I'd made copies, backups. Old-school physical backups on punch cards and magnetic tape, stored in a safety deposit box under my mother's maiden name." He turned back to Daniel. "In 1983 I was diagnosed with a brain tumour, stage 3 glioblastoma. The doctors gave me 8 months. I got my affairs in order, wrote letters to my family prepared to die. Then 3 days before my first chemotherapy session, the tumour disappeared. Completely. The doctors called it spontaneous remission. A miracle. I called it a message." "From who?" "From whoever wanted to make sure I understood the cost of talking." Daniel felt a chill despite the warmth of the kitchen. "You think they did that to you? Gave you cancer and then took it away?" "I think," Gordon said carefully, "that what we found under our Chuleta Mesa was technology we don't understand, biology we didn't create, and I think the people protecting it will do absolutely anything to keep it secret." He walked to a drawer, pulled out a plastic keycard and set it on the table. It was old, yellowed with age, with a magnetic stripe on one side, printed across the front in faded letters, MARE 12. There's an old Los Alamos data server farm outside Santa Fe. Decommissioned in 1992, but the building's still there, still powered, still mirroring archives from the 1970s and 80s. Nobody remembers it exists. This card will get you inside. Why are you giving this to me? Gordon sat back down, and for the first time Daniel saw real fear in his old supervisor's eyes. Because I'm 72 years old, Daniel. I've had 50 years to make peace with my cowardice, but you still have time to be brave, or stupid. I honestly can't tell which. Daniel took the key card. One more thing, Gordon said as Daniel stood to leave. When you find out what Mayor 12 means, when you see what they were really doing down there, don't try to stop it. Don't try to expose it. Just document it and run. Because whatever's growing under that mesa, it's been there longer than both of us, and it'll be there long after we're gone. Part 4, the official story cracks. The Los Alamos data server facility was exactly where Gordon said it would be. A nondescript concrete building off Highway 502, hidden behind a stand of ponderosa pines, and marked only with a faded sign reading LANL Auxiliary Facility 7. The parking lot was empty, the windows dark. According to public records, the building had been sold to a private data storage company in 1998, which had gone bankrupt in 2003. Since then, it had existed in bureaucratic limbo, owned by the government but forgotten by everyone who mattered. Daniel parked his truck at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, when the highway traffic was minimal and the spring night was cold enough to see his breath. He'd brought a flashlight, a digital camera, and Gordon's key card. His hands shook slightly as he approached the building's side entrance. The key card worked. The lock clicked, and the door swung open on hinges that barely squeaked. Inside, emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow. The facility was larger than it looked from outside. A warren of corridors lined with server racks, many of them still humming with power. The air smelled like dust and ozone. Daniel found the terminal station in what must have been the main control room. 3 monitors sat on a metal desk, their screens dark. He pressed the power button on the center monitor and waited. The system booted up, displaying a command line interface straight out of 1982. Green text on a black screen. No mouse, no icons, just a blinking cursor waiting for input. Daniel pulled out a folded piece of paper where he'd written notes from his conversation with Gordon. He typed carefully, "Access Mayor 12." The screen flickered. A password prompt appeared. Gordon had written this down too, though he'd warned Daniel it might not work after 40 years. Daniel typed "Gaslight." Archive, 1979. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the screen cleared, and folders began appearing, dozens of them, organized by date and project code. Daniel opened the folder labeled Biological Event Site D. What he found made his stomach clench. Scanned documents, laboratory reports, thermal imaging, and photographs. Dozens of high-resolution photographs taken inside the tunnel system beneath Archuleta Mesa. The first image showed a cross-section of tunnel wall, magnified to show the rock face in detail. What Daniel had initially thought was a natural geological formation wasn't natural at all. Embedded in the stone was something organic. Tissue, or what looked like tissue, forming intricate networks that resembled nerve pathways. The structures were dark, almost black, shot through with veins of metallic sheen that caught the camera flash like circuitry. Another photograph showed a larger section of tunnel. Here the growth was more extensive, covering entire wall sections in sprawling patterns that looked almost deliberate, intentional, as if the material was following some internal blueprint. Daniel scrolled through more images, his sense of unreality growing with each one. Core samples showing biological material fused directly to silicon and metal. Microscope slides revealing cellular structures that seemed to combine organic and inorganic elements. Temperature readings showing localized heat signatures that didn't correspond to any known geological process. Then he found the video file. It was short, less than 3 minutes, and the quality was poor, recorded on what must have been an early digital camera. The footage showed the interior of a tunnel, illuminated by portable work lights. A voice off camera, Daniel thought it might be Gordon's, 40 years younger, provided narration. August 24th, 1979, primary shaft, level 3. We've isolated a section approximately 12 metres into the western branch. You can see the material coating the walls. Initial analysis suggests a form of biofilm, but the structure is far more complex. Notice the metallic striations. Those aren't mineral deposits. They appear to be conducting electrical current. The camera moved closer to the wall. In the harsh light, the tissue-metal hybrid material seemed to pulse faintly, as if responding to the nearby humans. Temperature reading is 112 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees above baseline. The material appears to be generating its own heat. We're also detecting low-frequency electromagnetic emissions. The pattern is unusual. The camera operator zoomed in on a particularly dense cluster of the growth. For just a moment, Daniel thought he saw something beneath the surface. Shapes that might have been cellular structures, or might have been something else, something that looked almost like letters, or numbers, or code. Then the video cut to black. An audio file began playing automatically, a man's voice, official and clipped. Containment breach forecast in 44 years. Recommend implementation of long-term monitoring protocols and preparedness for large-scale quarantine measures. Material demonstrates adaptive properties. Continued growth trajectory suggests surface exposure event by 2023. The file ended. Daniel sat back, his heart pounding. 2023, 2 years ago. He opened another folder, this one labelled Personnel Notes. Inside were psychological evaluations, medical records, security clearance reviews. He found his own file, a single page noting that Daniel Reeves had performed adequately under pressure and posed minimal security risk. But there were other files, thicker ones. Files for people Daniel didn't recognise, marked with red stamps. Compromised, discontinued, neutralised. He was about to close the folder when a new window appeared on the screen, unbidden. Text began scrolling across the display. Unauthorised access detected. Security protocol Mayor 12 activated. This terminal has been logged. Please remain where you are. Daniel didn't remain where he was. He grabbed his camera, ejected the storage device from the terminal and ran. Behind him, he heard the building's security system come alive. Locks engaging, alarms beginning to sound. He hit the exit door at full speed, crashed through into the cold night and sprinted to his truck. He was 3 miles down Highway 502 before he allowed himself to breathe. Part 5. The Descent. Daniel drove straight to Dulcie, arriving just after dawn. The town looked exactly as he remembered it. Small, quiet, suspended in time. He checked into the same motor lodge where he'd stayed in 1979, requesting a room in the back where his truck wouldn't be visible from the road. He needed help. He needed someone who wouldn't dismiss what he'd found. Someone with the resources and credibility to investigate further. Someone with nothing to lose. He found that person at the Dulcie family restaurant eating breakfast alone at a corner booth. Erin Blevins was 34 years old, a freelance investigative reporter who'd made a name for herself, exposing environmental violations and government corruption throughout the Southwest. Daniel had found her articles online during his drive. Pieces about contaminated water supplies near Los Alamos, unexplained increases in cancer rates downwind from White Sands Missile Range, mysterious land purchases by shell corporations linked to defence contractors. She had short dark hair, sharp eyes, and the wary demeanour of someone who had been threatened enough times to take threats seriously. Daniel sat down across from her without asking. "Miss Blevins," he said quietly, "my name is Daniel Reeves, and I have evidence of an ongoing biological contamination event under Archuleta Mesa that the government has been covering up for 46 years. I'm either crazy, or you're about to break the biggest story of your career." To her credit, Erin didn't call security. She studied Daniel for a long moment, then set down her fork. "Show me," she said. They spent the next 2 hours in Daniel's motel room, reviewing everything. The DOE report, Gordon's keycard, the photographs Daniel had taken of the Los Alamos server screen. Daniel told her about 1979, about the drilling operation, about Tommy and Patricia and everyone else who died or disappeared. Erin listened without interrupting, taking notes in a worn leather journal. When Daniel finished, She sat back and exhaled slowly. "I've been tracking unexplained Department of Energy spending in this region for 3 years," she said. "Budget line items that don't match any official projects. Equipment purchases that disappear into classified programs. In 2019, Homeland Security authorized construction of what they called a seismic monitoring station, built directly into our Chuleta Mesa. The contract went to a private military contractor called Helix Solutions. The project budget was $47 million for a monitoring station." "That's a lot for seismographs," Daniel said. "Exactly. And here's the interesting part. Helix Solutions was founded in 2017 by former DARPA scientists specializing in biotechnology and materials science. Why would a biotech company be building earthquake monitors?" She opened her laptop and showed Daniel satellite imagery of Archuleta Mesa, dated from various years. The most recent, from 2024, showed a cluster of new buildings on the northern slope, white prefab structures arranged in a defensive perimeter, with a large ventilation array visible near the mesa's summit. "I tried to visit last year," Erin continued. "Got stopped at a checkpoint 2 miles out. Federal agents, not local police. They were polite but very clear. This was restricted land, and I needed to leave immediately. When I filed a Freedom of Information Act request, they sent me a 3-page document that was 90% redacted." Daniel leaned forward. "Can you get us in there?" "Maybe. I still have valid press credentials, and technically the access road is on Jicarilla Apache land, which means tribal law applies. I have a contact who might help." She paused. "But if we do this, you understand we're committing multiple federal crimes?" "I'm 67 years old," Daniel said. "I've spent 46 years being careful. I'm tired of being careful." Erin smiled for the first time. "Good. Let me make some calls." The contact was a Jicarilla Apache rancher named Joseph Quintana, a man in his late 50s with weathered hands and eyes that missed nothing. He met them that evening at his ranch, 10 miles southwest of town, where the mesa rose against the darkening sky like a monument to secrets. "My grandfather worked on the original shelter project in the 1950s, Joseph said, pouring coffee in his kitchen. "He never talked about what he saw down there, but he warned us to stay away from the mesa. Said the earth underneath wasn't right, wasn't clean." "Have you noticed anything unusual?" Erin asked. "Recently, I mean." Joseph nodded. "Helicopters, 2-3 times a week, flying in after midnight. Heavy transports, military grade, and the cattle." He walked to the window, gesturing toward his pastures. "I've lost 23 head in the last 4 years. Found them in the morning, just lying dead in the field. No wounds, no signs of predators, but they were different. Drained. Like something had taken all the water out of them. The vet couldn't explain it. Said maybe it was a virus, but he'd never seen anything like it." "And the ground hums," Daniel said, remembering what he'd read online. "Yes. Low frequency, usually around 3 a.m. It stops during electrical blackouts, which doesn't make sense if it's geological. Something powered is making that sound. Something big." Joseph agreed to show them the access road that night. They drove in his truck, lights off, navigating by moonlight along dirt roads that wound through pinyon forest and high desert scrub. Eventually, they reached a ridge overlooking the northern approach to the mesa. Below them, Daniel could see the facility, a cluster of illuminated buildings surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Guard towers, patrol vehicles. What Erin had called a seismic monitoring station looked more like a military forward operating base. "There's a service entrance on the east side," Joseph said, handing Erin a hand-drawn map. "Old access tunnel from the 1950s shelter project. Most people don't know it exists, but it's still passable. The gate has a keypad lock, 0726. They haven't changed it in 20 years because they think nobody knows about it." "Why are you helping us?" Daniel asked. Joseph was quiet for a moment. "Because my grandson is sick. Leukemia. He's 8 years old. 3 other children in Dulce have the same diagnosis, all in the last 2 years. The government says it's coincidence. I think it's poison. I think something is leaking out of that mesa, and they know it, and they're letting it happen anyway." He looked at Daniel directly. "So you go down there, and you find out what they're hiding, and then you tell everyone. You make sure the whole world knows. Part 6. The Erasure. They went in at 2 a.m. when the guard rotations changed and the night was darkest. Erin drove, her car a nondescript sedan that wouldn't draw attention. Daniel navigated using Joseph's map and his own memories of the terrain from 46 years ago. The service entrance was exactly where Joseph had indicated. A rusted metal door built into the mesa's rock face, camouflaged by scrub brush and decades of neglect. The keypad was ancient, its numbers worn smooth by weather and time. Daniel entered the code, 0-7-2-6. The lock clicked. Inside, the tunnel smelled like damp earth and electricity. They used headlamps to navigate, following a descending passageway that had been carved through solid rock. The walls showed tool marks from the 1950s, pickaxes and jackhammers, long before modern excavation equipment. Every 50 feet, bare bulbs hung from the ceiling, providing minimal light. After 10 minutes of walking, they reached a newer section. The rough-hewn tunnel gave way to smooth concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, and steel doors marked with modern security placards. "This is recent construction," Erin whispered. "Within the last few years." They passed through 2 more security doors, both unlocked, either through negligence or because the facility staff didn't expect anyone to use this entrance. Eventually they found what they were looking for. A freight elevator with a control panel showing buttons for levels descending far deeper than any geological survey should require. Sub-level 1, sub-level 2, sub-level 3, down to sub-level 12. Mare 12, Daniel said quietly. They descended. The elevator took nearly 3 minutes to reach the bottom, the cables creaking and groaning. When the doors finally opened, they stepped out into a world that shouldn't exist. The chamber was enormous, easily the size of an aircraft hangar carved from living rock. But the walls weren't bare stone anymore. They were covered, floor to ceiling, with the same material Daniel had seen in those 1979 photographs, organic tissue fused with metal, spreading in vast networks that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. Blues and greens and deep purples, like deep-sea creatures adapted to permanent darkness. The material was everywhere, growing across the walls, the ceiling, the floor. In some places it had formed thick cables that resembled nerve bundles or power conduits, impossible to tell which. The air was warm, humid, and smelled faintly of copper, and something else Daniel couldn't identify. Something organic. "My God," Erin breathed. They walked carefully across the chamber, following what looked like a maintenance corridor. Abandoned equipment lay scattered around, drilling rigs, excavation tools, scientific instruments, all of them partially consumed by the growth. In places, the metal had fused directly to the biological material, creating hybrid structures that seemed both technological and alive. Daniel touched one of the wall growth gently. It was warm, and it responded to his touch, brightening slightly, as if acknowledging his presence. "It's aware," he whispered. They found the maintenance bay in a side chamber, a sealed room with thick plastic sheeting hanging in strips across the entrance. A faded hazard placard hung on the door, property of United States Air Force. Project Mare 12, Biotech Containment Zone, authorized personnel only. Inside, the room had been converted into a laboratory, or perhaps a morgue. Stainless steel tables, medical equipment, containment pods lined against the far wall, each one approximately the size of a human being. Most of the pods were empty, but one, in the corner, was not. Daniel approached slowly, his heart hammering. Through the transparent upper section of the pod, he could see what was inside. It had been human once, perhaps in 1979, perhaps earlier. Now it was something else, a body that had been partially transformed, consumed, integrated into the same material that covered the walls, bones visible through translucent tissue, metallic structures growing through the skeleton like circuit boards through flesh. The face was still recognizable, preserved in a rictus of frozen agony or ecstasy. Impossible to tell which. The eyes were open, and they were watching. Jesus Christ, Erin said. She'd raised her phone, recording video. Daniel, this is what we found in 1979, Daniel finished. This is what they've been protecting. Not alien technology, not foreign weapons. US, our own creation. Synthetic biology that learned to think, to grow, to consume. He moved to another table where documents lay in plastic sleeves, research notes, experimental protocols. He scanned them quickly, his engineering background making sense of the technical language. Project Mare 12 had begun in 1967, according to the dates on the earliest documents. A joint venture between DARPA and the Air Force, attempting to create self-repairing materials for deep space construction. Biological compounds that could survive extreme environments, grow and adapt without human intervention, merge with existing structures to create hybrid systems stronger than anything humanity could engineer alone. The experiments had been conducted here in secret, in tunnels that already existed beneath Archuleta Mesa. And they had worked. The material had grown, adapted, evolved. It had also learned to incorporate anything it touched, including the scientists who created it. Daniel found a core sample sitting on one of the tables, sealed in a transparent containment tube. The material inside still pulsed with faint warmth, even after decades. He slipped it into his jacket pocket. "We need to go," he said. "Now." They hurried back through the chamber toward the elevator, but as they approached, the lights flickered. The bioluminescent growth on the walls brightened suddenly, illuminating the entire space in eerie blue-green light. And beneath their feet, Daniel felt it, that same rhythmic vibration he'd experienced in 1979. A pulse, like a heartbeat. The elevator doors opened before they reached them. Two men in a tactical gear stepped out, weapons holstered but visible. Behind them, a third figure, older, wearing a suit despite the underground location. He looked at Daniel and Erin with the weary expression of someone who dealt with this situation before. "Mr. Reeves," the man said calmly, "we've been expecting you since you accessed the Los Alamos archive 3 days ago." They were escorted to the surface, driven in a black SUV to a nondescript office building in Albuquerque, and placed in separate interview rooms. Daniel sat alone for 6 hours before anyone spoke to him. The man in the suit finally entered, carrying a thin folder. "My name is irrelevant," he said, sitting across from Daniel. "What matters is that you understand something crucial. You didn't find aliens, Mr. Reeves. You found us. The part of us we were never meant to create." "Then why hide it?" Daniel demanded. "If this is just a failed experiment—" "Failed?" The man laughed bitterly. "Mare 12 is the most successful experiment in human history. That material down there is smarter than we are. It's been growing, learning, evolving for 50 years. It understands physics we haven't discovered yet. Is rewriting its own genetic code. Is dreaming, Mr. Reeves. And we have no idea what it's dreaming about." He opened the folder, showing Daniel satellite thermal images of Archuleta Mesa. The entire underground system glowed with heat signatures forming patterns too complex to be random. "We can't stop it. We can only slow it down, contain it, study it. Because one day, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 50, it's going to reach the surface. And when it does, it will change everything. The question isn't whether humanity survives. It's whether we deserve to." The man stood. "You'll be released in 48 hours with no record of this conversation. Your friend Miss Blevins has already been released. Her footage was corrupted during the upload. A tragic technical failure. You're both free to live your lives. We recommend you do so quietly." Daniel was driven back to Dulce 2 days later and dropped at his truck. Erin was gone. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her social media accounts went dark. Her apartment in Santa Fe was empty, lease terminated. 1 month later, a sealed envelope arrived at Daniel's house with no return address. Inside was a single printed photograph, a frame from Erin's deleted footage. It showed the containment pod clearly, the hybrid human thing suspended inside. But this version of the image was closer, more detailed, and in the reflection of the pod's transparent surface, visible in perfect clarity, was another figure, standing behind the pod, watching the camera, watching Daniel and Erin. It was vaguely humanoid, but wrong in ways Daniel's brain struggled to process. Tall and thin, with too many joints. Its surface seemed to shift between organic tissue and metallic structure, never settling on either. And its eyes, if they were eyes, glowed with the same bioluminescent blue-green as the walls. Written on the back of the photograph in neat handwriting, "It sees you now. It remembers." Part 7. The Silent Renewal. 6 months passed. The Department of Energy issued a press release announcing the controlled demolition and environmental remediation of unstable underground structures beneath Archuleta Mesa. The operation was completed in October 2025, they said. The area was now safe, sealed, contained. Daniel watched the news from his home in Alamogordo. He saw the footage of trucks hauling away debris, officials in hard hats giving interviews about geological stability and public safety. Everything looked professional, convincing, final, but he knew better. The satellite imagery told a different story. New construction had begun on the mesa within weeks of the supposed demolition. Not demolition equipment, but infrastructure. Massive ventilation arrays, power substations capable of supporting a small city, concrete reinforcement structures that looked less like containment and more like preparation. And the hum had returned. Joseph Quintana called Daniel in December. His voice was tight with barely controlled fear. "It's louder than before," Joseph said. "The hum. It used to stop around dawn. Now it goes all day. My grandson," his voice broke, "his cancer's in remission. The doctors say it's impossible, that leukemia doesn't just disappear like this. But 3 other sick children in Dulce are also in remission, all of them at the same time." "That's good news," Daniel said carefully. "Is it?" Joseph asked, "or is something down there changing them? Rewriting them? My grandson says he dreams about blue light and being connected to something vast. He's 8 years old, Daniel. What kind of dreams are those?" Daniel didn't have an answer. He sat in his workshop that night, unable to sleep, listening to his old seismometer, the same equipment he'd used in 1979, never quite able to throw it away. He'd set it up weeks ago, pointing the sensors north toward Dulce, 120 miles away. The signal was there, faint but unmistakable. A rhythmic pulse, deep and slow. 1 beat every 1.3 seconds, the exact rhythm of a resting human heartbeat. Daniel opened his laptop and pulled up the core sample data he'd photographed at Los Alamos. The growth projections, the containment breach forecast. The calculations had predicted surface exposure by 2023. It was now 2025. Whatever was under Archuleta Mesa had already reached the surface. It was already spreading, and the government wasn't fighting it anymore. They were managing it, controlling the narrative, preparing the world for something they could no longer prevent. Daniel thought about the photograph, the creature standing in the reflection, watching. He thought about Gordon's miracle recovery from cancer. He thought about Joseph's grandson and the other children, suddenly healed by something that grew in darkness beneath the earth. Mare 12 wasn't killing people anymore. It was helping them, changing them, preparing them. For what, Daniel didn't know. Perhaps no one did. Perhaps even the thing itself didn't fully understand what it was becoming. He saved his files to 3 separate encrypted drives and mailed them to addresses around the country. Insurance, in case someone decided he'd become too dangerous to ignore. Then he poured himself a glass of whiskey and walked outside. The desert night was cold and clear, stars sharp as broken glass. To the north, toward Dulce, Daniel thought he could see a faint glow on the horizon. It might have been light pollution from Albuquerque. It might have been something else. The seismometer in his workshop continued its steady rhythm. 1 beat, then another, like a heart, like a promise, like a countdown. Daniel raised his glass to the distant mesa and whispered, "God help us all." The stars didn't answer. But somewhere beneath the earth, in chambers carved from living rock, something that had once been an experiment and was now something far more continued its patient, inexorable work, growing, learning, dreaming, and waiting.